Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a story that, well, it really takes a shocking turn within just one family. We start with the disappearance of 7-year-old Steven Stayner back in 1972. But tragically, that event sort of sets the stage for something much, much darker involving his older brother, Kerry Stayner.
Yeah, the man who eventually became known as the Yosemite Killer.
Exactly.
And what makes this case just so compelling and honestly deeply unsettling is that twist. You know, it starts as this awful but maybe familiar story of a missing child, but then it spirals into something horrific all within the same family.
So today we want to sort of navigate through all the complexities here, try and understand the forces at play.
Yeah, piece together how one event could lead to another, so tragically different outcome.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Merced, California, 1972. The Stayner family, Delbert and Kay, their 3 daughters and their 2 sons, Steven, born in 65, and his older brother, Kerry.
And their lives just completely changed on December 4th. 7-year-old Steven was walking home from school. Pretty normal day.
Until he wasn't. He was approached by a stranger.
Right. This guy, Irvin Edward Murphy, he tells Steven he's from a church, asks if the family wants to make a donation.
And Steven, being a helpful kid, offers to take him to his mom.
Such an innocent thing to do, right. But that was the moment, the entry point for everything that followed.
Because then a white Buick pulls up, driven by Kenneth Parnell.
And Steven, totally unsuspecting, gets in the back seat.
We really need to talk about Parnell for a minute.
Yeah.
Because his history, well, it shows he was deeply troubled long before he ever met Steven.
Oh, absolutely. Parnell's early life was really unstable. His dad left when he was 5, and that seems to have kicked off this pattern of, bad behavior, car theft, arson.
There had been time in juvie.
Yeah, multiple times. And even back then, a psych evaluation noted this really chilling phrase, his peculiar tendency to search for trouble and punishment. Like foreshadowing, right?
Wow. And there were other disturbing things, too. Acts of self-harm.
Yeah, apparently he tried pulling out his own teeth once. And another time, this sounds really gruesome, he shot himself and then jumped off a barn roof onto a plank with nails.
That paints a picture of someone with just profound issues.
Yeah.
Deep psychological disturbances.
You could say that. And maybe the most alarming thing, back in 1951, when he was just 20, he pretended to be a cop, used a fake badge to lure an 8-year-old boy.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he assaulted the child badly, did prison time for it, even escaped custody at one point before they caught him again. So this wasn't new territory for him. He had a clear history of predatory behavior towards kids.
Okay, so how does Irvin Murphy, the first guy Steven met, fit in?
Well, he and Parnell worked together at a resort in Yosemite National Park, actually.
Yosemite. That detail feels significant later, doesn't it?
It really does. Parnell was a nighttime janitor there. Murphy's job isn't as clear, but basically, Parnell manipulated him into helping with these abductions. Murphy was described as, very trusting, naive, maybe a bit simple-minded. Parnell seems to have played on that.
Convinced him it was some kind of religious thing.
Yeah, a religious-type deal involving raising the kids they abducted, just pure manipulation.
Unbelievable.
So once Steven was in the car, Parnell just left Murphy standing there on the sidewalk, drove Steven off to his cabin in Kathy's Valley.
And Kathy's Valley was near Steven's grandfather's place.
Shockingly close, maybe a half-hour drive.
The horror for Steven started immediately, didn't it? That first night.
Yes. Parnell assaulted him that night. And it continued regularly for the next couple of weeks and then just for years.
And the psychological torture, too.
Telling
Telling him his parents didn't want him.
that they'd given Parnell legal custody. Just devastating lies for a 7-year-old kid who's terrified and alone.
So Parnell tries to create this fake normal life, changing Steven's name.
To Dennis Gregory Parnell, yeah.
Yeah.
Enrolled him in different schools as they moved around California. Parnell had various jobs, sometimes left Steven alone.
Left him alone. Could he have escaped?
Well, Steven was even allowed to drink and leave the house sometimes. But you have to remember, he'd been isolated, manipulated for so long. He had no idea where to go, who he could possibly trust. Parnell's control was insidious.
There was a woman involved at one point. Barbara Merced.
Right. She lived with them for about 1.5 years in Santa Rosa. She claimed she had no idea, thought they were father and son.
But Steven said she tried to help lure another boy.
He did. According to Steven, Parnell told Barbara to try and get another kid into the car near a boys' club back in '75. Thankfully, it didn't work. But yeah, it's hard to believe she could have been completely unaware.
It really stretches credulity, doesn't it? Even if Steven called him Dad, the whole situation.
The power dynamic, the lack of any family resemblance, it should have set off alarm bells for someone living there.
And Steven was thinking about his real parents during this time.
Oh yeah, he said he thought about them often. But that constant manipulation just built this huge wall, made escape seem impossible.
So what changed? What led to the escape in 1980?
It seems as Steven got older, hit puberty, Parnell's interest shifted. He started looking for younger boys.
And disturbingly, he started using Steven to try and find them.
Yeah, basically forcing Steven into being this unwilling accomplice, which is just another layer of awful.
But Steven fought back, sabotaged the attempts.
He did. Whenever he could, he'd try to mess things up so other kids wouldn't get snatched. That probably didn't sit well with Parnell. Created resentment, you'd think.
Then came Timothy White.
Right. February 1980. Parnell, Steven, and another guy, Randall Portman, they kidnapped 5-year-old Timothy in Ukiah.
But then Parnell left them alone.
Yeah, on March 1st, Parnell went off to his job. He was working as a night security guard by then, and Steven saw his chance.
She took Timothy and just left.
Took Timothy and they hitchhiked back to Ukiah.
And walked straight into the police station.
Mm-hmm. And said those famous words. I know, my first name is Steven.
Wow. After 7 years.
Can
Just incredible.
you imagine the weight of that moment? For him? For the police hearing it?
The story just exploded after that, right? National news.
Massive, huge media attention. Books like I Know My First Name is Steven, and then that TV movie that so many people saw.
And Parnell, arrested quickly.
The very next day, March 2nd, he got convicted on 2 counts of kidnapping. But the sentence...
Only 7 years. With parole after 5?
Yeah, it was widely seen as incredibly lenient, especially considering the years of abuse, and he wasn't even charged for the assaults in Merced County.
Why not?
Jurisdictional issues, statute of limitations, basically legal loopholes meant he wasn't held accountable for that part.
What about the accomplices? Murphy and Portman.
They got lesser charges for helping with the kidnappings. Interestingly, Steven himself always seemed to believe Murphy was kind of a victim too, manipulated by Parnell.
So Steven goes home. But it wasn't exactly a simple happily ever after, was it?
Far from it. Think about it, he'd basically been living as an only child under these extreme, bizarre circumstances for 7 years, readjusting to life with siblings. It was tough.
Especially with his older brother, Kerry. You mentioned he wasn't happy about sharing a room again.
Yeah, that's what was reported. And school was hard, too. Kids can be cruel. He faced ostracism, taunts, because of all the publicity around his case.
Just more trauma after escaping. It's heartbreaking.
Totally. He ended up dropping out of high school, started drinking. His relationship with his dad got strained, too.
I read something about his dad struggling to connect with him.
Yeah, Steven mentioned that after the initial media frenzy died down, his dad had trouble, hugging him. Almost like he still saw Steven as the little 7-year-old who disappeared, not the teenager who came back.
That lack of physical affection must have really hurt.
Steven said it did. He felt his parents tried to help him catch up with schoolwork, but that emotional distance, especially from his father, was hard. It shows how complex trauma's impact on a family can be, right?
Absolutely. But Steven did find some stability, some happiness later.
He did. He married Jody Edmondson in 1985. They had 2 kids, Steven Jr. and Ashley, stayed in Merced.
Same town where it all started.
Yeah. He worked at a pizza place, but he also got involved with a child abduction support group. Tried to use his experience to help find missing kids, prevent it from happening to others.
That speaks volumes about his character, his resilience.
Incredible resilience, yeah. But then tragedy struck again.
His death in 1989.
September 16th, he died in a motorcycle accident coming home from work. Just another devastating blow for that family.
So much pain.
Unimaginable. And his story, the abduction, the return, the miniseries that came out just before he died, the book, it kept him in the public eye. And Merced eventually put up that statue in 2010.
The one of him holding Timothy White's hand.
Yeah. A really powerful symbol of his courage and maybe the hope he represented despite everything.
But while all this focus was on Steven, his ordeal, his return, his death, what was happening with the rest of the family, particularly Kerry?
Well, that's where the story takes that really dark turn we mentioned. The siblings, and especially Kerry, started feeling neglected, overshadowed.
I mean, you can kind of understand the parents focusing intensely on Steven after he'd been gone 7 years.
Oh, absolutely. It's understandable. But for Kerry, who was 11 when Steven was taken, that intense focus meant he felt left behind. ignored, maybe.
And this likely had a pretty significant psychological impact on him.
It seems almost certain. Kerry wasn't untalented, you know? He was nominated most creative student at high school, good at graphic arts, cartooning, played baseball.
What was he like, personality-wise?
People described him as quiet, reserved, seemed nice enough on the surface, but neighbors did notice his frustration with all the attention Steven got.
Did anyone see warning signs?
One neighbor apparently made this really chilling prediction, saying Kerry would eventually seek that kind of attention too, but probably in a negative way, suggests there was this underlying need for recognition that just wasn't being met.
And then Steven's death in '89 must have just compounded those feelings.
Deepened that sense of inadequacy, of alienation, yeah. And then another layer of trauma. In 1990, Kerry moved in with his uncle Jesse.
The uncle who was later murdered.
That's right. Found shot dead. The crime was never solved, but guess what the headlines focused on?
Let me guess. Steven's uncle being murdered.
Exactly. Not mentioning Kerry living there or anything about him, just pushed him further into the shadows. And critically, it came out later that Kerry himself had been abused by that same Uncle Jesse.
Wow. Okay, so abuse, neglect, feeling overshadowed. It's a toxic mix.
A deeply toxic mix. Kerry worked various jobs, like as a glass cutter. A friend mentioned seeing him have what sounded like a breakdown once, talking about wanting to hurt his colleagues. Real warning signs of growing instability.
And eventually he ended up working near Yosemite.
Yeah, as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge in El Portal, right near the park. And that location, well, it becomes central to the next chapter.
The Yosemite murders in 1999.
February.
Yeah.
Carol Sund, her daughter Julie, and their friend Silvina Peloso, they were tourists sightseeing. They just vanished.
Their car was found later.
Weeks later, burned out, down a cliff. Carol and Silvina's bodies were inside, in the trunk. Julie was still missing.
And then the FBI got that map.
Yeah, a hand-drawn map with that horrible note. We had fun with this one. Led them to Julie's body.
Were there suspects initially?
They looked at a couple of guys with criminal records in the area, but those leads didn't pan out.
And then another murder.
July 1999. Joey Armstrong, a naturalist working in Yosemite, found decapitated near her cabin.
And that's when the focus shifted to Kerry.
Investigators found evidence at the Armstrong scene, and Kerry's distinctive vehicle had been seen nearby. They tracked him down, found him at a nudist colony, actually.
And brought him in for questioning, just as a witness initially.
Right. He wasn't the prime suspect at first, but during the questioning with FBI agent Jeff Rainick, things changed dramatically.
He confessed.
He confessed to killing Joey Armstrong and the three sightseers, Carol, Julie, and Silvina.
Just like that, out of the blue.
It wasn't quite out of the blue during the interview. Rainick built rapport. But yes, he confessed. And what's really disturbing is that he tried to, bargain during the confession.
Bargain for what?
He asked for disturbing things, images of young girls. He also asked if his family could get the reward money and requested placement in a federal prison near his family.
What did he end up choosing?
He prioritized getting the images. It's just chilling.
Did he say why he did it?
He claimed his homicidal urges went way back, predated Steven's abduction even, said he'd had these feelings since he was maybe 6 or 7 years old.
6 or 7, that's
Wow.
deeply troubling. It raises questions about nature versus nurture, doesn't it?
Exactly. And then you add in the known abuse from his Uncle Jesse and the allegations about his father abusing the daughters and Kerry too. That history, combined with any potential predisposition, it's complex.
So Kerry Stayner was convicted. He's on death row now.
Yes, convicted of the murders, currently on death row. Still creates art, apparently.
The contrast between the brothers is just staggering.
It really is. Both experienced significant trauma, same family background, but their paths diverge so drastically, so horrifically. Steven, the survivor, the rescuer, dies young. Kerry, the quiet brother who felt overlooked, becomes a killer and lives longer.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that trauma affects people differently, that what's going on inside can be hidden.
And that the absence of, the kind of dramatic public trauma Steven had doesn't mean someone else in the family isn't suffering deeply, especially when there's that kind of imbalance in attention and validation.
The irony is just
Yeah.
chilling and incredibly sad. Steven, the hero figure, his life cut short. Kerry, living in that shadow, maybe with his own demons from the start, commits these terrible acts.
And it leaves you with so many uncomfortable questions, doesn't it? How much did that feeling of neglect, of being constantly overshadowed, contribute to Kerry's actions?
Versus his own claims about feeling violent urges from a young age, plus the abuse he suffered. Was it inevitable somehow?
We can't know for sure. But the tragedy ripples outwards
to the victims of the Yosemite murders, their families, and back again to the Stayner family itself, just marked by unimaginable loss and trauma on all sides.
It really does make you think about the unseen battles people might be fighting, that complex, unpredictable mix of what's inside someone and what happens to them externally,
Yeah.
how it shapes a life.
Yeah. A deeply disturbing case with no easy answers.
Well, thank you for walking us through this incredibly complex and tragic story today, and thank you for joining us for this deep dive.